The woman who had worked in that house for 11 years was the last person anyone called when the owner died. Not the second to last, not an oversight, the last. The family knew before she did. The neighbors knew before she did. The man who delivered milk to the gate found out the night before, and he had never set foot inside that house. She found out when she pressed the bell at 5:30 in the morning, the way she had every morning for 11 years, and no one answered. She waited. She pressed it again. She sat down on the step outside the gate with her steel tiffin box on her lap, because that is what she did when the family was slow to rise. She had no reason to think this morning was different from any other. She did not know yet that the woman inside, who had been the only person in that household to ever say good morning to her with her eyes, not just her mouth, was already gone, quietly, in the night, with no last words and no one calling Mina. Her name was Mina, 43 years old, house help, Bai, as the family called her, for the Mehta household in Pune, since her youngest son was 8 months old and her husband's back had broken permanently on a construction site in Hadapsar. She had not chosen the work. She had walked toward the only door that was open, and she had shown up every single morning since, before the city was fully awake. She knew which child in that house was allergic to ghee. She knew where the spare key to the puja room was kept. She knew that the eldest daughter-in-law cried quietly on the phone in the upstairs bathroom every Tuesday afternoon. No one had told her any of this. She had simply been present, year after year, in the specific, invisible way of someone the world looks through rather than at. What Mina could not have known sitting on that step in the November chill was that something she had done 6 years earlier, something small, unremarkable, already long forgotten by her, was quietly moving toward her. It had been moving for years, and it was almost here. She was let in eventually, not with words. The gate swung open, and a hand waved her through without looking at her. The house was full of people she had never seen, relatives and neighbors, and the specific chaos of grief arriving in a home that is not prepared for it. She went to the kitchen. She knew that grief requires feeding. She began to cook without being asked. She made chai for 40 people and laid it out on trays. She scrubbed the floor of the prayer room. She swept the marigold petals from the doorway. She carried things from room to room, arranged things no one had thought to arrange, and worked through the entire day without food, without rest, and without a single word of thanks. At midday, one of the daughters-in-law passed through the kitchen and stopped. She looked at Mina with the particular expression of someone who has just noticed a piece of furniture they did not place there. "Why are you still here?" she said, not unkindly, not cruelly, as if the question were purely logistical. Mina said, "I thought you might need help." Then she turned back to the stove. The funeral came and went. Relatives stayed on for a week, as relatives do. Mina arrived every morning at 5:30 and left at 9 in the evening. She slept 4 hours a night. On the 8th day, Rahul Mehta, the eldest son, a man who lived in Bangalore, and Mina knew primarily by the smell of his cologne and the disruption of his visits, called her into the sitting room. He did not offer her a seat. He had 2 family members beside him. He told her the house was being sold, that the family was relocating, that her services would no longer be required, that she would receive 2 months' salary as a parting payment. He said all of this while looking at the wall above her head, not from cruelty, from the particular blindness of a man who has never had to calculate what 2 months covers. She walked home that evening along the road she had walked for 11 years. The streetlights were coming on. The peanut vendor on the corner, the one she had nodded to every morning for a decade, called out a greeting. She nodded back. She did not cry. She had long ago stopped waiting for the world to be surprised by what she could absorb. At her kitchen table that night, she looked at the numbers. Her eldest son was in Polytechnic. Her younger son had 2 years left of school. 2 months' salary would cover rent for perhaps 10 weeks, food for perhaps 6. The silence around those numbers was a specific kind of silence, not peaceful, not dramatic, just the quiet of a wire pulled tight. She began looking for work the next morning. The first house did not open the door. The second told her they already had help. The third, a large bungalow on the main road where she had seen a notice, asked her to wait at the gate for 20 minutes before a woman came out, looked her over, and said, "We need someone younger." She said it the way people say things when they do not consider the weight of the sentence they are carrying. Mina thanked her anyway. She had no idea why. It simply came out. She left her number with a woman named Mrs. D'Souza 3 streets away, who was known to sometimes need extra help. Mrs. D'Souza looked her over and said, "I'll let you know," in the tone of someone who would not. Mina walked home in the heat, and somewhere between the third turning and her own street, she stopped walking, just for a moment. She stood at the side of the road with her bag over her shoulder and felt for the first time in a long time the full weight of what she had been carrying. The years, the mornings, the thankless rooms, the invisible arithmetic of a life that had bent itself entirely towards others without ever once being caught. Then she straightened her back, and she kept walking. That night, she sat by the window after her sons were asleep, and she thought about calling her sister in Nashik. Her sister had a contact who knew someone running a canteen on one of the new IT parks on the outskirts of the city. It was not what she wanted. It would mean 2 buses each way, arriving home after 10, her younger son alone in the flat every evening. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She looked at the ceiling for a long time. She did not make the call. If you have ever worked faithfully in a place that never once stopped to see you, stay with Mina, because what happened next is the reason this story exists. Subscribe so you don't miss where this goes. The following morning, she went out again. On her way to the employment office on Senapati Bapat Road, she passed an elderly man outside a chemist's shop who had dropped his medicines, blister packs scattered across the gutter. She stopped. She picked each one up and checked whether any were cracked or broken before handing them back to him. He looked at her with the particular surprise of someone unused to being helped by a stranger. She said nothing. She kept walking. At a crossing 2 streets further, a small girl in a school uniform stepped off the pavement before the light had changed. Mina put her arm out, gently, without touching her, and the girl stepped back. The light changed. The girl crossed. She did not look back. No one watching would have marked either moment. They were not performances. They were not calculated. They were simply what Mina did when no one was watching, which is to say what she had always done, everywhere, her entire life. 6 years earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon in August, she had been walking from the Meta house towards the bus stop when she passed a girl sitting on the footpath beside a crumpled scooter. The girl was perhaps 19. Her knee was bleeding through torn salwar fabric. Her hands were shaking. The screen of her phone had cracked in the fall. People walked past. It was the middle of the afternoon, and every person on that road had somewhere to be. Mina had somewhere to be. Her own bus came every 40 minutes, and she had almost certainly missed the one that would get her home before her sons returned from school. Her feet hurt. The day had been long. She stopped anyway. She took the dupatta from her own shoulders, faded blue cotton, the same one she wore every day, the one she had owned for 7 years, and pressed it against her girl's knee. She sat down on the footpath beside her and held it there. She helped her make the call to her mother, and she stayed, in the afternoon sun, on the concrete, until a car arrived 20 minutes later, and the girl's mother rushed out, and the girl was no longer alone and no longer frightened. Mina never knew her name. She did not give her own. She stood up, adjusted the now stained dupatta back over her shoulder, and walked to the bus stop. She had missed 2 buses. She was late. Her sons had arrived home to an empty flat. She did not think about the girl again. The moment filed itself away in the part of her mind that holds things that don't seem to belong to any particular story. The girl's name was Priya. Her mother's name was Dr. Anjali Sood, and Dr. Anjali Sood had thought about the woman in the faded blue dupatta with a frequency and specificity that she could not explain to anyone who asked. She had walked that stretch of road 3 times looking for her. She had asked the shopkeepers. She had not found her, but she had not stopped looking either. Some acts of goodness are too precise to dissolve. They stay in the mind the way a well-made thing stays, not because of their size, but because of their quality. Now here was the same woman who had once pressed her only dupatta against a stranger's wound, sitting in the waiting area of a city employment office, filling out forms for domestic placement, hoping someone would choose her. She had been waiting 2 hours. The queue moved slowly. The woman at the counter was managing more than one thing at once. The man behind Mina coughed steadily, the kind of cough that suggests something is not going to resolve on its own. She filled the forms. She waited. She was almost at the counter when the woman ahead of her, who had been taking a long time and kept apologizing quietly over her shoulder, turned around fully and looked directly at Mina. The recognition was not instant. It moved across Priya's face the way light moves when a cloud shifts, slow, then sudden. 6 years had passed. Mina was in different clothes, but the face was the same. The stillness was the same. The particular quality of someone who does not need the room to look at them was exactly, unmistakably the same. "Were you in Kotrud?" Priya asked. "6 years ago, near the Poud Road crossing. Did you stop for someone who had fallen from a scooter?" Mina looked at her. Then she said, "Yes." Priya was quiet for a moment. She looked at Mina the way you look at something when you need to be certain before you say the next thing, because the next thing, once said, will set something in motion that cannot be undone. She was not at the employment office for herself. She was there on behalf of her mother, Dr. Anjali Sood, who ran 3 diagnostic clinics in Pune and who had been trying to fill a senior household coordinator position at her residence in Bonaire for 3 months. She had turned down 4 candidates. She had told her husband, technically able, not the right person. She had not been able to say more than that, because what she was looking for did not appear on any form. Priya stepped to one side of the queue and called her mother from the corner of the waiting room. The conversation was short. Dr. Anjali asked one question: "Is she the one?" Priya looked back at Mina, sitting upright on the plastic chair with the forms in her lap. "I think so," she said. Dr. Anjali said, "Bring her." If this story is reaching someone today who needed to see this, someone who has been faithful in a place that never saw them, type "I'm still standing" in the comments. This moment was built for you. That afternoon, Mina sat in Dr. Anjali Sood's sitting room in Bonaire in an actual chair at an actual table with tea placed in front of her by Priya, who set it down the way you set something down for a person whose comfort matters to you. Dr. Anjali sat across from her. She was a precise, warm woman who had spent her career making diagnoses and had learned that the most important information rarely appeared on the form. She described the role. She named the salary, almost double what the Maida House had paid. She described the schedule, the household, the expectations. Then she paused, and she said the sentence that Mina would carry for the rest of her life. "My daughter told me once that you stayed until she wasn't frightened anymore. That is the only credential I care about." Mina sat with that sentence for a moment. She had spent 11 years being invisible in a house that she had held together with her hands. She had been let go with 2 months' cash and a wave through a date. She had been told she was too old, too slow, too easily replaceable. She had stood at the side of a road in the afternoon heat and felt the full weight of a life that had poured itself into others without keeping anything in reserve. And she had straightened her back and kept walking. Not because she expected this, not because she had calculated a return. She had stayed on that footpath 6 years ago because a frightened girl should not be alone. That was the whole reason. That was all of it. And yet, here was the record. Here was the ledger no one had been keeping, except that something had been keeping it all along, in the quiet architecture of what people do when they believe themselves unseen. The dupatta pressed against a stranger's knee, the medicines picked up from the gutter, the child held back from the crossing, each one unremarkable, each one, it turned out, permanent. She looked up from the table. "When do you need me to start?" she said. She began on the first Monday of December. Dr. Anjali introduced her to the household by her full name, Mina, not by, not the help, and said to her children, "This is Mina. She is to be treated with the same courtesy you would give anyone in this house." The children nodded. The youngest one, who was 7, handed Mina a drawing he had made that morning of the family dog. Mina accepted it with both hands, the way you receive something that is offered with the whole of a small person's intention. She still arrived before dawn. She still knew where things were before being shown. She still stopped for people on roadsides. She had not become a different person. She had simply found herself in a space that was finally the right shape for who she had always been. Her eldest son finished Polytechnic the following year and found work in an engineering firm in Kotrud. Her younger son passed his board exams with the highest marks in his school. Neither of them knew it, not then, not yet, that the turn in their family's story had begun on a Tuesday afternoon 6 years ago, with a cracked phone screen, a faded blue dupatta, and a woman who was tired and had somewhere to be, and stopped anyway. Some inheritances are invisible. Some legacies are built without the knowledge that they are being built, one quiet, faithful act at a time, in the full and unsuspecting belief that no one is watching. Someone always is. There is a kind of goodness that does not announce itself, that shows up before the city is awake and works without an audience and stops in the heat for strangers and refuses quietly to become what the world keeps trying to make it. It does not keep a record of what it is owed. It simply keeps showing up. And the world, which is far less indifferent than it appears, keeps its own record in return. Do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. Galatians 6:9. Someone in your life is showing up every day in a place that hasn't noticed them yet. If Mina's story reminded you of someone, or if Mina's story reminded you of yourself, leave their name, or just the words "still faithful" in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it. It may be the thing someone needed to see today. This is God's Hand Stories, where the hand behind the story is the last thing you see.